Welcome back to The Lawyer You Know, and the verdict is in for the R. Kelly criminal case in the Eastern District of New York. But before we get to that verdict, we're almost to 15,000 subscribers. So if you're joining us today and you're one of the 85+% that is not subscribed but watches a bunch of our videos, we're asking for that subscription now to help us get to 15K and beyond. Because this is what we do here. We like to break down cases, talk about them, discuss with you guys to see what potential jurors think, what lay people think, what other lawyers think. We've got some law enforcement in here, people that have been through a lot, that are part of this community. Get in the chat, get in the comments, let us know what you think. We've even got some people that have been on juries before that have given us some insight that's invaluable to trial lawyers. So we're going to get to the R. Kelly verdict, and there's actually a lot to talk about. A lot's happened since our last video, right? So the prosecution finished their closing arguments. The defense did their closing arguments. The prosecution did their rebuttal. We talked about how all that works procedurally. But before we get to what happened in those closing arguments and what I think may have swayed the jury one way or the other, let's talk about the verdict, okay? I'm sure if you're here, you've already seen guilty on all counts. Okay, so that includes the racketeering. That includes 8 counts of violating the Mann Act, which prohibits the travel over state lines for illegal sex. And then all the headlines are R. Kelly convicted of sex trafficking and racketeering. And that's what everything's saying at this point. So, you know, we're going to go through what that means. We're going to go through as well what his potential sentences look like, okay? And I've been saying this is potentially our last video on R. Kelly. It might not be. It for sure is not going to be, because we all know he's still facing charges in Illinois and Minnesota, I believe. So I'm sure we'll be talking about those when they come up. But his sentencing is anywhere from 10 years to life in prison. But that sentencing is not happening until, I think, May 4th, 2022. Which is very interesting, and R. Kelly will sit in prison until then, awaiting his sentencing, which is, 8 months from now, which is a long time to set off for sentencing, which is interesting to me, and I think they're probably going to do a lot between now and then, and we'll talk about what sentencing hearings are like, what you can do, what type of evidence you can produce. It wasn't a surprise that R. Kelly didn't testify because of those other charges he's got in other states. They would have been able to use this against him. You better believe that they're keeping close watch on how this trial went and how, in my opinion, relatively quickly they convicted R. Kelly of all of these kind of difficult crimes to prove. Now, I've talked to lots of lawyers who think that racketeering is actually the easiest crime to prove because it's so vague and you just prove the defendant's a bad guy and they convict him of racketeering. So I have seen that, but to me, who looks at it and tries to think about it and look, did they prove this? Did they prove this? Did they prove that specifically? With a fine-tooth comb, I think it's a difficult charge to prove sometimes. So there's some disagreement there, but I mean, it seemed like it was, I mean, if you think about how long this case was, 20 plus days, 50-ish witnesses, all sorts of evidence, video recordings, audio recordings, pictures, notes, written documentation, medical evidence, expert testimony, DNA evidence, and then 1 day of deliberating, a little over 1 day of deliberating. To convict him on all counts. And that's pretty quick, right? Which is the indication we thought, right? I thought what I bet is, I said if I was going to put my money down in Vegas, I'm betting on a conviction because the conviction rates are so huge. People called me an idiot in the chats. I also said for fun, I'm going to bet that it's a hung jury, that there's at least one person in there that's paying attention and thinks, this just doesn't smell right for this kind of weird, why didn't they just charge him with statutory rape? Or why didn't they just charge him with something like that? I've had a lot of friends ask me, why didn't they just charge him with one specific sexual abuse, sexual violence, statutory rape? And outside of the statute of limitations, which not all of these are barred by the statute of limitations, but if you're charging somebody with statutory rape and they're 30 years old now, and they're saying the statutory rape happened 18 years ago, now it becomes a he said, she said. Did it happen? When? Where? The details become much more important. It's one singular person, and the jury's got to determine whether they believe just that person, which is a lot harder than if, like we've been saying throughout, you can just pile quantity over quality as far as victims, as far as testimony, as far as evidence, That is what it seems like happened in this case. That's why they went after the RICO and the racketeering versus just one individual crime of sexual abuse. And it's interesting because I haven't seen I haven't seen the specific verdict form of which ones they convicted on and which ones they didn't. But there were 14, I think, underlying racketeering acts under this racketeering charge that they brought against R. Kelly. Okay. They proved 12 of those acts involving 5 victims: the singer Aaliyah, as well as women named Stephanie, Geronda, Pace, Jane, and Stephanie again. So they didn't prove all of the victims' racketeering acts, which I think is interesting. Especially they point out that Sanjay, Sonia, however you say her name, I always mess it up when I read it. They say that hers were not proven. They did not convict based on her testimony. So if they would have just brought her, this would be a not guilty verdict, which is why they brought all of the different victims, all of the stories to prove this big encompassing you're a bad guy charge of racketeering versus you're a guy who did one bad act and we have to focus and hone in and prove that one bad act. Very interesting to me. And when we get exactly which acts they did and didn't convict on, we may talk through them some more. I looked before this, couldn't find that specifically. It happened like an hour ago and I've been working all day, so I could have missed something very easily. But I still want to jump on as quick as I could, like I said I would, and we can still talk through this. All right, so let's back up now a little bit and talk about the closing arguments that we didn't get to in the last video. The defense's closing argument. I read some of it. I watched some of it, or I should say, I read some in the actual transcript. I watched some from some of the news articles that talked about it and some people breaking it down and saying what they thought of it. To me, while I think some of the substance was good, I do not think the delivery was something. I mean, it's obvious now to look back, hindsight's 2020. Not something the jury bought, not something they liked, right? And if the jury's not with you, they're going to hate you with this kind of closing. The defense attorney said, first off, he compared him to Hugh Hefner, compared R. Kelly to Hugh Hefner, MLK Jr., and Mike Pence. Very weird grouping of 3 people, right? Hugh Hefner was obvious. He was saying that Hugh Hefner lived a life like this. He's a playboy. He's a sex symbol, but he's not a criminal. That's why I compared him to Hugh Hefner. MLK was very convoluted. Not sure how because he was a genius and people looked up to him and followed him and wanted to be around him. Like the MLK stuff was weird. And then the Mike Pence stuff was the biggest reach and weirdest reach of all of them because Mike Pence apparently calls his wife mother, which is not illegal. And R. Kelly similarly forced his girlfriends to call him daddy. I don't know. I think that was a total miss. A lot of times lawyers try to bring in analogies and do stuff like that and to make the jury relate and understand and think of something like maybe they were trying to hit everybody on the jury, right? Maybe there's somebody who likes Hugh Hefner on the jury. Maybe there's somebody who likes MLK, somebody who likes Mike Pence. So he's just trying to hit them all and say, see, R. Kelly's like these people you like. Fell flat, in my opinion, and how it sounded. And then he said, a lot of people were watching Surviving R. Kelly, and now a lot of people are surviving off R. Kelly, which was his theme, that all these people were extortionists and they were liars. And I mean, he went above and beyond to say that the victims lied and lied and lied and lied. They knew what they got. They asked for it. They wanted it. And to me, even though I think that attacking the victim's credibility is absolutely how you should do it in this case, I think calling sexual abuse victims liars and cheats and steal and thieves and extortion and all the stuff he said about them, to me, usually is not the best way to present it to a jury who doesn't know any of these people from Adam. They've probably heard of R. Kelly, but that's usually not the best way to attack the credibility of victims, in my experience, and what the research shows. The research shows victim attacking does not usually go well in a jury trial, period. So you have to do kind of a dance and walk on eggshells, for lack of a better word, when you do attack the victim's credibility. Now, we have to do it all the time in criminal cases, and sometimes it's very successful. but you have to do it the right way. And to me, it did not seem like this defense lawyer did it the right way. He mockingly at one point quoted one of the victims saying, "He raped me." Not something you want to do as a defense lawyer in a closing argument, in my opinion. Okay, just my opinion. So then when we talk about and he didn't really talk about the prosecution's closing at all. He nitpicked here and there of some inconsistencies and things. Some of it was good. And like I said, a lot of the substance was good. The way he did it though, form over substance, as they like to say. Okay, let's talk about the prosecution's rebuttal now, which is they get to go last. So after the defense did this weird closing, the prosecution gets up and they get to finish and be the last thing that the jurors hear. And they said, he's not a playboy, he's not a genius, he's not, a god among men. He's a predator, he's a criminal, he's generally a bad guy, basically, is what they say in rebuttal. Then I thought this quote was very interesting from the prosecutor's rebuttal. It's like we took a time machine and went back to a courthouse in the 1950s. What they're arguing is that all these women and girls were asking for it, and they deserved what they got. Never mind that many of them were teenagers and too young to consent. So they basically, that could be the slogan or the mission statement of the Me Too movement, is this ain't the 1950s where you just say women ask for it when they end up in these situations. And that's exactly what these defense lawyers are trying to do. That's basically what the prosecution argued. So it was very interesting. And to me, it was a very good rebuttal, a very good hammer at the end of the case. They highlighted some of the videos where the women would walk back and forth, because a lot of it was about consent during the defense's closing. And the prosecutor said, we saw these videos where they walked back and forth, apologizing, doing embarrassing things. R. Kelly was sitting right there. Did that look like something that was consensual, or did that look like somebody that was being controlled by a criminal enterprise? Let's see what else we got. And another thing that the defense lawyer did, that usually all research says, and I realize we live in a new age where people don't trust the government, people don't trust law enforcement, but usually they tell you, don't blame the government or blame the cops and call them horrible names during your closing. And that's basically what he did. He said they wanted to get this conviction by any means necessary. It's worth more to them to convict R. Kelly than anything else. They don't care the way they get there. And they just put witnesses up there to lie over and over and over again. And the government was perpetuating this fraud, basically. So he just went after the government, saying they were liars, the witnesses were liars, they can't believe they did it this way. And he doubled down on it after hearing the verdict with some of his quotes as well. So that was all very interesting to me. And research shows that's not a great way to win cases. And it turned out to be true in this case. Okay, next. Jury questions. So as they were deliberating, I was following along, and it turned out the jury had a number of questions. And some people don't know that, but the jury during deliberation can ask questions. They can ask to review evidence. They can ask to see something again. They can ask to read a transcript, like a lot of us have talked throughout. They can actually do that while they're deliberating because they want to look at some things. And just for anybody that thinks they didn't do any due diligence back there, they did ask a lot of questions, and they asked for some things specifically. They asked for the transcript for Sonia, which is the victim that they ended up not convicting him on the acts that she testified to. That's reportedly, I haven't confirmed that myself by cross-referencing which acts go with Sonia, but that's very interesting. So they asked for the transcript so they could reread her testimony because they were thinking, are we going to convict him on each of these individual witnesses and what they said and the acts that correspond with what they are testifying to? And it turns out the answer was no to Sonia. Okay. And specifically, she was locked in the studio was one of the things she complained of. And they also asked for a plan, like not a blueprint, but like the plans of how the studio was set up so they could see where the rooms are, where she was locked in, if that's feasible, if it makes sense based on some of the other testimony. So they went back and they looked at that specifically. Now, I don't know if they did it with all the evidence and all the victims, but they did with her. And what they found was, at least reportedly, is that the government did not do enough to prove what Sonia said was true. They also asked for a letter that one of the victims wrote to her brother about her relationship with R. Kelly. So they were looking and asking questions about specific evidence and wanting to review specific transcripts because they have the evidence back there, right? but they don't have the witnesses to say, tell me what you said again. So the way they fix that is everything's transcribed, as you know, and they can read those transcripts to see what those witnesses say again. Very interesting. Let's talk a little bit about R. Kelly's reaction. All the reports said that he just basically looked stoic, was looking straight ahead, whispered one or two things to his lawyers, and that was it. No emotion, no outburst of anything. Protesters outside surely were, but not him in the courtroom. And Kanik, one of his lawyers, said he was not anticipating that verdict. They totally ignored, meaning the jury, all the inconsistencies that all the witnesses gave. So he was upset about that, obviously. And then he doubles down. That's what I was talking about, doubling down on the government just being horrible in this case. He said, I don't know if I'm more disappointed in the jury's verdict or the government's actions in this case. I am sure that we are going to appeal, which is something else we've talked about. We've talked a lot about this, and I guarantee they're going to appeal if they lost. And there's all sorts of reasons for an appeal throughout this case, and we'll probably talk about it more when we see their motions for appeal and their notice to appeal and things like that. And a lot of these inconsistencies, a lot of the things that happened throughout this case that were more prejudicial than probative potentially, or cumulative evidence that I'm sure there was a lot of pretrial motions on and already a lot of arguments on. I'm sure we're going to see that repeated because a lot of people don't know. In appeals, you have to protect the record. So if you want to appeal for a specific witness, let's say one of these victims they thought was cumulative, didn't add anything to the case, was just saying the same thing all these other victims said. They've got to file a motion in limine to exclude her. They've got to object before she testifies, object throughout her testimony, preserve the objection, and then they can appeal it. But if they just say, okay, no objection to her testifying, now they can't come back and appeal usually as cumulative. They have to protect it with an objection before and during trial. Usually objecting once is not enough to protect these issues for appeal. You got to put on a huge fight. We talked about some of the challenges during jury selection, how you have to object multiple times, use a peremptory challenge. If you don't have any challenges left, you have to ask the judge for another peremptory challenge. The appellate process is so strict and rule intensive and procedural that you have to make sure you protect this case throughout for appeal. And we know that they did on a lot of these issues. So one of the other issues that the defense brought up and that they talked about a little bit is that the jury should have been sequestered throughout this case. Some of you asked me if they were, and they said even if they weren't sequestered throughout this entire case, they definitely should have been sequestered this past weekend, because they closed on Friday, started deliberating. They came back on Monday, finished deliberating, gave a verdict. They were able to go home, talk to their friends and family, go on the internet. They're not supposed to. They're instructed not to. And when they come back, they're asked, did anything happen? Did any of you look? Any of you talk to anybody? Did anything happen that would make you disqualified now as a juror? And they all said no, apparently, because they gave their verdict. So that's another interesting issue for appeal, is should they have been sequestered? Something we talked a lot about in the Derek Chauvin trial, which got even more national attention than this. Should those jurors have been sequestered? So far, nothing overturning that verdict, saying they should have been sequestered. So if that jury shouldn't have been sequestered, I'm not sure they have a very good argument that this one should have been sequestered. But you guys tell me if you disagree. The overarching theme was they overwhelmed this jury with bad conduct, and they felt like they had no other option but to put this guy away. That's what we've been talking about the whole time, whether or not it fits into the Mann Act or racketeering or any of these racketeering acts, or whether or not there was just an overwhelming mountain of evidence they couldn't overcome. That's kind of what it came down to. So I would say, based on the closing arguments, the prosecutors did a much better job than the defense attorneys. And it seems like that's something that led to the conviction. But I will stand pretty firm on, I think, based on everything I've read and seen about this trial, the most damning evidence, unfortunately for us on the outside, was those videos and were the video and audio recordings that we couldn't see and we couldn't hear. So that's something that's really hard to comment on and for us to really just pontificate and guess about what's happening. But to me, that was the most damning evidence, because I didn't think all of the victims were as damning as they could have been. I'll just put it that way based on my read of the situation. But again, just one man's opinion, just one lawyer's opinion. So that's kind of where we're at. And that's where we're going kind of towards sentencing now. Those other cases are not affected by this in Minnesota and Illinois. They can still go forward. They can ask for different things. They can bring in different evidence. All sorts of things can change and happen in those cases that are not affected by this conviction and are not affected by whatever the sentence are, whether it's 10 years or whether it's life. So now I'm going to get into the chat and answer some questions that you guys have. I'm sure you have a ton of questions. I'm going to scroll through. I'm sure a lot of people are saying this was all garbage. He should be free. And some people saying he should rot, where, and this was great. So I'm going to skip through most of those comments. But I do want to hear if you guys have questions or comments about the conviction, about the timing of the conviction, about appeal, about sentencing, about any of the legal aspects of this case, because that's what I like to focus on. That's the content I think you guys like to see, and that's what you come to our channel for. So if you're not subscribed, take a second to subscribe. We're almost at 15,000 subscribers. We're growing pretty fast. It's really fun. You guys make it fun with your questions and your comments, so make sure you keep bringing questions and comments. Like this video if you want more R. Kelly videos in the future going into the sentencing phase, but make sure you subscribe so you can be part of what we do here going forward. The other cases, a lot of Rittenhouse questions that we're talking about. There's a lot of cases we're considering focusing on next, so give us your input so we can do that, and make sure we focus on the content that you guys want. The only way you can really do that is by subscribing to our page, so make sure you do that. Let's get into the comments now for some questions. All right. All right, so this is an interesting point. Amalek. I'm pretty sure if prosecution team took all your sex partners you ever had and make you look guilty of the same charges as 2021, the language has changed people. Not just your sex partners, but also your Facebook, your Tinder, your Instagram, your Snapchat, your text messages to your buddies. And I don't disagree with you that a lot of people could be convicted of past action that would not maybe have been as frowned upon in the past, but would, and not illegal in the past, that would be illegal now. So times are changing. I do think this case rises to the level above your average person, I'll just say. And Chenille, the parents are as guilty as he. I think a lot of the parents are guilty in this situation as well. Okay, so Marty Black Fly. He won't get the appeal. The judge was very careful. So there's been mixed opinions on how the judge acted throughout this case. And one of the interesting factors is the judge is the one who determines the sentence, not the jury. Okay, so what do you think this judge is going to do? However you feel about the judge, how you think the judge did in this case, she for R. Kelly, against R. Kelly, she is the one that's going to determine the sentence. Do you think it's going to be closer to 10 years, or do you think it's going to be closer to life? All right, let's see here. All right, so a lot of comments, which are always, cool, and we're good with the comments, but I'm going to try to focus on the questions about the legal aspects. Dom K, yep, anyone convicted has a right to an appeal. So, Queen of the South, sequestered for what? R. Kelly is too famous for that to have mattered. I disagree. I think they could have kept them off the internet completely this weekend, because before this weekend, they didn't have all the evidence and all the arguments. But once this weekend started and they had already started deliberating, they're in the zone. They are in their jury room. And I think sequestering them over the weekend would have been a good idea. I don't know if it's going to rise to the level of reversible error. Probably not as far as appeals go. All right, we've got a super chat question, which we always get. We always can see those because they get highlighted from Naya X. Do you think a better defense strategy would have been to say that R. Kelly has the mind of a child to explain why he likes kids? So that is not actually a viable defense to statutory rape. Your age is really the only thing that matters. Even if mentally you're younger, you still can't have sex with people that are minors. But I do think that it appeared throughout the trial that he can't read, can't write, doesn't know his social security number, has to depend on other people for everything, especially his finances. I do think that could have been delved into a little bit more to say, how's he supposed to be a mastermind of all this? Or are his handlers actually controlling him? Because they know what he likes. They know that he likes to have a lot of women around, and they're actually the ones controlling it, giving these women money to keep R. Kelly happy so they can keep stealing money from R. Kelly, or making him overpay for things, or when he puts down a backpack full of cash, they take a couple stacks out of it. I do think that his mindset and his kind of deficiencies and mental deficiencies could have been something that come into play in this case. I do. Not the way that necessarily you said it, but I think it's a good point. All right, Dom K, another super chat question. Lawyer, do you think he has a great chance of winning an appeal? How does the federal appellate process actually work? So we've actually had more success in criminal federal appeals than in state federal appeals. I'm not sure the reason why. I think one of them is federal judges are appointed for life. So they're not as afraid to make decisions or afraid to get overturned. And sometimes they overstep their bounds like state court judges don't. But additionally, federal courts, federal judges really dive in. They have a lot of resources to do research and look at all the case law and arguments that you make. And if they find something there, they're not afraid to overturn it. And if it gets overturned, they're also confident in their conviction rate. Like we said, 90+%. If they got to go do it again, they'll go do it again. I'm sure they don't like getting overturned, and that's not to say that they will. But I think he has a better chance in federal court than in state court. I also think he's got a better chance than people like Ronnie O'Neill that we've talked about in other trials. I think he has a better chance as far as that goes. We saw Bill Cosby win a big appeal. When the lawyers of the rich and famous get involved, high-profile lawyers, private criminal defense lawyers are very good at what they do. And we've had a lot of success with federal appeals. We had a case one time that we tried once, lost, won on appeal. Tried a second time, lost, won on appeal. In the middle of the third trial, more misconduct basically by the FBI. The judge, federal judge, appointed for life, no fear, awesome judge, loved her here in our area, threw the case out. And I've lost plenty of cases in front of her. I'm not saying I win every trial I have in front of her, but that one, after we lost twice and won on appeals, ended up getting thrown out because it was just so shady, the circumstances surrounding it. So it can happen. It does happen. And I think he does have a chance at an appeal here. I'm not going to say he's going to win because I don't know, and we'll see kind of what happens. Without being there and seeing the whole trial, it's so hard to say whether or not he will win an appeal. All right, let's see what else. All right, let's see. New Chris. Due to his guilty verdict, will the charges be dropped in those other trials he has coming up? He's obviously not going anywhere. The answer to that is a hard no. They're definitely not going to stop because of some of the reasons we're talking about. He could win an appeal. Whoops. I don't know what I just clicked. He could win an appeal, which then, they're definitely going forward on those charges. A lot of times they want to make an example out of certain people, which could be the case here, where they are going to go forward in Illinois and Minnesota and everywhere else, convict him all over the place, bombard him with these convictions and life sentences, and then maybe he'll stop appealing, or maybe he'll just, sit there and rot, which might be what they're after. I don't know what's going to happen, but they're definitely not going to drop those other charges just because he was convicted here. Good question, though. So Dom K, those videos, what sealed it, in my opinion, I agree with that. Unfortunately, we don't know the exact content, but that's kind of what I'm leaning on. So Leslie Montgomery, this was a big topic of discussion as well. What about the other people that helped him? There was some immunity given out. Lawyers disagreed with, I see these like pundits on, the news station saying it is so unlikely that they only charge one person in racketeering. Usually they charge everybody. And then you see another lawyer saying they always just charge one person. To me, depends on the situation. It depends on the racketeering charge. If there's one head of a snake, and you want to cut it off, and he's the biggest fish, and that's who you go after. I've seen that a ton in racketeering cases where they just go after the biggest number one guy or girl in the racketeering scheme in the criminal enterprise. Not unusual at all. But then you have some where it's just rampant and so horrible, and they want to go after everybody and get everybody, and that's also not unusual. So I've seen it go both ways. So Dom K, another great observation. Once the jury heard and saw his voice, they changed their entire mindset. I think that's really important when a criminal defendant doesn't testify. That's what the jury's hanging on to, is what can they, no lawyer can spin it. No lawyer can tell you, nah, that's not true, or it's inconsistent. If it happened 20 years ago, their memory is faded. Lawyers can't do that with videos and audio recording. So I don't know if somebody asked what an appeal is, Street Exchanger. So an appeal can be a lot of things, right? It can get somebody to throw out a verdict, start a new trial. We've even had appeals that ended up with the judge literally, like I said, dismissing the charges, and our client went home, literally. So appeal can ask for a lot of things. You can also just appeal the sentence and not the verdict. If he loses in the appellate for the verdicts, if the sentence ends up being life, he can appeal that and try to get that down. A lot of people in here talking about Hugh Hefner. What we don't know about him, his case could be next. It's true, it could. All right, let's see here. So no name. What about criminal versus civil lawsuits when it comes to sexual assault? Arkansas has amended their law to allow sexual assault victims to sue. How does that work? I'm not sure what the law was before, but in Florida and most states, victims can sue of sexual assault. They can sue civilly, and then the government makes the decision, the state or the federal government makes the decision as to whether or not to go forward criminally. Yeah, Joan, I'm not sure. That seemed like far off. I double and triple checked May 4th, 2022. I have no idea why they set it off so long. Maybe they're going to gather a lot of documentation to come to R. Kelly's aid to help in the sentencing. Charges in other states, Teresa, we've gone over those a couple times. I expect them to continue forward on them. So Joe Higashi, legit leg kicks. So let me guess, everyone that does 50 Shades of Grey, are they criminals because the sex is weirdo? This is kind of what one of the themes of the defense's closing argument is: kinky sex is not illegal. Being a playboy and having lots of sexual partners is not illegal. Jury didn't buy it based on the evidence of R. Kelly's life, not just like 50 Shades of Grey type sex, like you said. All right, Dom K. Why is sentencing on, this is another super chat, why is sentencing on May 4th, 2022 in the New York case? Why so far back? Thanks, fam. I don't know. I mean, I don't know why. The only thing I can think of is maybe some of those other cases are affecting the sentencing here. R. Kelly's lawyers had to agree to that. Actually, that's not true. In federal court, they can do whatever they want. The judge can tell you this is sentencing and too bad, but they can file a motion to try to move it up if they wanted to, because he is going to sit in prison. But at this point, he doesn't have the presumption of innocence anymore. He's not cloaked in that. He's sitting in jail, a convicted felon at this point. So he doesn't have a lot of rights at this point. And it doesn't, whether or not sentencing happens tomorrow or May 4th, he still has to go through the appellate process, and he's not getting out before then. So a lot of times sentencing does get kicked out. We just had a federal case plead recently, and sentencing was kicked out, I think, a month or two, not 8 months. So it's not always 8 months like this one, but no real explanation at this point. Again, this just happened in the last hour. Maybe some more stuff will come out that'll give me a better idea. And if it does, I'll sign on and let you guys know. We already got this one. Vonnie Janae, great point. Slapped me right in the face with it, right? So if you were opposing counsel, if you were the prosecutor, and I got up there and said, listen, man, he struggles with stuff. He can't remember a social security number. Can't. You're like, this man sings hundreds of songs every night, memorizes all of them, memorizes dance moves, knows all this stuff. BS. Good point. Good point. So I like having you guys in here, smart people. Diversity of thought is always good, in my opinion. All right, Dom K. Again, thanks for the super chat. Lawyer, due to these particular charges, will he have to register as a sex offender? That's a good question. When released. Also, is it 80% or 85% that you have to serve? Usually it's around 80%. I'm not sure exactly what it is in the Eastern District of New York. Sometimes federal sentences are 100%. So it really depends. And if he gets life, obviously, no percentage of life is going to get him out. I would think the Mann Act would carry with it some registered sex offender status, I would think, but I'm not positive. I've never had a Mann Act case. So that also telling you. Now, the racketeering doesn't automatically have it just because some of those racketeering acts include the sexual nature. It could be part of it. So some charges are guaranteed. You have to have the registered sex offender status. Others, it's kind of negotiable, and the state at this point probably is going to throw it in, I would think, and make him register as a sex offender. That would be my guess there, but I'm not positive. Good question. All right, let's see what else we got here. So, Kavicius Coombs, what will happen to his career? So his name, R. Kelly, is off the gym right now. That's a big loss for him. Hope the rest of the world's watching and learning. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but it's obviously going to crush his career. The lawyers have already said since the documentaries and stuff that happened, his career's been crushed. That they actually made this argument that that's why a lot of these women jumped ship and are testifying against him now because his money ran out and they were there for the money. When the money was gone, so were they. And all these documentaries and accusations crushed his career already. So it's a good point. All right, Cyrus Sherry. Andrew Cuomo is terrified right now. Anybody that is swept up in this Me Too movement with the sexual violence should be scared right now, and especially high profile people that are swept up in this right now. Convictions are coming left and right. They're going to throw the book at you. They're going to hammer you. So yeah, I mean, if you have these accusations in your life, you should be terrified, in my opinion. So Dom K, lawyer, can you clarify for us? Another super chat, thank you. Can you clarify for us, does each underlying act have a sentence, or is it solely the one count of racketeering sentencing-wise? It's the one count of racketeering. They have to prove at least 2 of the racketeering acts to convict for that count of racketeering, but the count of racketeering is what has the sentence. And then the Mann Act also has all of those 8 counts have sentences as well. And we'll hear how they're brought, if they're concurrent, meaning happening at the same time, or consecutive, meaning stacked on top of each other. 10 concurrent sentences 5 times is 50 years, but 10 consecutive sentences 5 times is 50 years, but 10 concurrents only 10 years. So it makes a big difference. And they proved, I want to say 12 of the specific racketeering acts for that racketeering count. All right, we already answered this one. Did we get this one? Yep, we answered this one. All right, keep the questions coming. Oh, money line parlay. How long could this appeal take when he has already been in jail for 2 years? Appeals can take years and years and years. Everything is clogged and slowed down because of COVID. We used to tell clients cases take between 6 and 18 months. Now it's 2 to 4 years. I mean, everything is delayed, even the appellate process. All right, new Chris, another super chat. Do you think the jurors felt like they had to find him guilty, not based on the validity of the charges, but because of the bad things they heard about trial? This is something his lawyers have said. They said it in closing arguments. They've said it to the media already, that they just piled on so many bad acts that the jury felt they had no choice. They could not let this man walk free. Whether or not the charges fit the crimes or the crime fit the bad actions didn't matter. They were going to convict him no matter what. And they were scared if they didn't convict him that the world would look at them as putting a predator and a criminal on the street. So that is definitely a concern and something that'll be brought up in the appellate process, I'm sure. So Rodney Williams, if the credibility of the accusers was proven to be lies, why was that overlooked? The jury deliberation room is sacred. There are no cameras in there. There's no recordings in there. They are the trier of fact. So nothing is a fact unless they say so. And if they looked at the accusers, they obviously didn't believe some of them because they didn't convict on all the racketeering acts, but they did believe others. They may have thought they lied about certain things and not others. The jury is the one that can make a decision and say, Rodney, you lied about having black hair, but you didn't lie about having brown eyes. So I'm going to say you did have brown eyes and you didn't have black hair. They can go through every statement somebody makes, and they can determine what is true and what is false and convict based on those facts. That is a job for the jury. So even if we feel like something's proven, the jury is the one with the final say. Cyrus, we got this super chat already. So that's a good question, Teresa. Where does the money he could make now go that he's in prison? So he's going to have a huge restitution number, probably. Some civil lawsuits that he hasn't already dealt with to deal with. So a lot of it's probably going to go to creditors, and people are just going to get in line for it, basically. I agree, Angel Eyes. I'm not saying it makes him dumb. I'm just saying it's an argument they could have made. You know, if you're trying to make arguments, you're trying to stack things up, it's an argument they could have made. Argument they could have tried to make, which could have been easily blown up, as we saw. Dom K, underlying acts, we got that question. So I don't think it's going to take 35 years potentially, but I wouldn't be surprised if it took 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So Nisi Gainey, we've talked a lot about why they charged him with racketeering. Question is, did they charge him with racketeering this time because it would have been considered double jeopardy if they had charged him with something similar to child pornography, since he was acquitted of that? So if they found another piece of child pornography, they could absolutely try him again for child pornography. They just can't try him based on those same facts, that same video with that same victim. Oh, sorry, Dom, I just saw another super chat question, so let me get to that first. Lawyer, but do you think the judge sending the jury home over the weekend had an impact? Also was reported the judge looked upset with the verdict. Your take. Interesting. I haven't seen that. I mean, that's what's so hard, right? It's like politics. Everything seems so charged that I can't tell what's true and what's not when I see reports and people saying, oh, the judge was for him, the judge was against him. It's going great for him. It's going horrible for him. That's what all the reporting was. So I can't really comment on the judge's facial expression, but the judge doesn't get to pick the verdict. We'll find out what the judge thinks, because she gets to hand down the sentence, and they always like to make a little statement when they hand down the sentence. So we'll see what the judge thought, and we'll see whether or not she had a mad look on her face. What was the other question? Let me find it. Oh, do I think sending the jury home had an impact? That's the point. Just like Rodney's question, we don't know what has an impact on the jury because we don't get to interview them after. there's privacy in that room. It's sacred, like I said. So we don't know, but I'm always better safe than sorry. That's my mindset. And I think in a situation like this, where it's all over the media, it's all over the internet, it's all over social media, better safe than sorry. Just sequester them over the weekend is what I would have done. But I'm not a judge, so we answered that one. Okay, Nisi, let's get back to this question. They charged with racketeering, I think, because it was so broad and as to not make a he said, she said on one individual charge. They saw trying to pick one individual child pornography charge, how it can get beat in the past, obviously. And I think an individual statutory rape charge could have gotten beat because not found enough evidence. He said, she said type of deal, not beyond a reasonable doubt. Also, if they would have just picked Sonia, they would have lost. As we saw, the jury did not convict him on the racketeering acts that corroborate or that correlated with Sonia. So they just put it all together in a big, vague criminal charge and proved racketeering, and that's how they got him. So Zarp, I'm confused how much time will he likely get. 10 years is the minimum. Life in prison is the maximum. And that's federal prison. All right, Dom K with another super chat. Based on what you've seen, what sentence do you think fits this guilty verdict? If you were the judge right now, what sentence would you give him? Last question. Hey, feel free, keep them coming. That's what makes this so fun is everybody's questions. And all of your questions have been good legal angle type questions, which I love to answer. I don't like questions like, are you for R. Kelly or against him? Because I'm neither. And so from my perspective, I would give him somewhere in the range of, let me think. I would give him somewhere in the range of 10 to 20 years. And I would think if I was the judge, I'd maybe do something like 16 years or 15 years, depending on when the sentence comes down. So he's right around 70 years old when he comes out, punished. You know, he got convicted. The jury gets convicted. The judge doesn't get to decide that. I definitely would not put him in for life. I would say somewhere in the 10 to 20 range, probably somewhere around 15 years. That would be on the lower side of the sentence. Angel Eyes, good answer. Different victims, different cases, different acts, different evidence, not double jeopardy. Thank you, Kathy. I wish we could have watched the trial too, but federal court. All right. Any other questions here? Got that one. Anything else? Amalek, I agree. The Mann Act is really broad. So a lot of people asking how much time do you think he'll receive? How much time? I answered that one. Kirsten, thanks for joining us as well. Yeah. So Patricia, do you think R. Kelly's lawyer sealed the deal with comparing him to MLK and Mike Pence? That was really weird. Like I haven't seen a social miss like that in court in a long time. So I think that was a miss, but I don't think that sealed the deal. Research shows closing arguments do not usually change a jury's mind. So that's just something we do a lot of research on that. Research actually shows that the majority of jurors' minds are made up after opening statements, which is way too early in my opinion. But it is what it is. Do you think the Gabby Peto case has anything to do with this verdict? No, I do not. All right, Naya X, another super chat. If he is found guilty and sentenced in the other federal case, will he have to do most of that time too? So, listen, if one of them gives him a life sentence, it is what it is. They'll go through the appellate process. If he gets sentenced, yeah, 10 years for this case and then 10 years for that case, yes, that's going to be 20 years. Sometimes lawyers can try to consolidate stuff like that, but usually different convictions, different jurisdictions, different sentences. He'll serve whichever one he was convicted on first. Then he'll go to Chicago or wherever he gets convicted next, Illinois, and serve time there. Then Minnesota, serve time there. So yeah, it can stack on top of each other. So if each one he gets 10 years or something less than life, yes, he can get out of one prison just to get into another. Dom K, so you agree? You think that's what the judge is going to give as well? Interesting. So other people are saying 20 years plus in here, 30 years. And some people think the verdict's going to get overturned. So LRBP, yeah, he's got other charges. So he's got other convictions, and the judge can do anything she wants, right? So she wants to sentence him to the minimum, all 8 or 9 charges, then that could be 80, 90 years, which is basically life for a 54-year-old guy. But they can just give 10 years each running concurrent and ends up just being a 10-year sentence. So they can kind of finagle the numbers to do. The judge can put him away as long as the judge wants to put him away. So Dom, what's interesting is, yeah, he has no criminal background theoretically, but prior arrests can sometimes come into sentencing guidelines. All right, Dom, again with another super chat question. Can and will the Illinois federal case use any of the evidence, testimony, witnesses, or any info from this current trial in the Illinois case? Yes. Yes, they can. But R. Kelly's lawyers can also use stuff to impeach if the witnesses change their story or anything like that. It has to be different acts, right? They can't convict him of the same exact acts here in New York and there in Illinois. But if they have something that happened specifically in Illinois that they didn't testify about in this case, or they didn't charge him with in this case, I had somewhere what the charges were. I think the charges were more specific in the Illinois and Minnesota cases, maybe sex abuse or another child pornography charge. It wasn't a broad, general, nationwide racketeering charge, so it was a little bit different. So Karen Gail Kirk, can you explain the difference between a federal prison and normal prison? I'm in the UK, so I don't understand the different jails. So they say the worst place is county jail, where you can sit waiting for your court date or waiting for your trial. Prisons range, right? Supermax is the worst, where you're just basically locked in a cage for the entire day, 23 hours a day of darkness. And that are like prison camps that are nice, and they could be federal. There'd be some white collar prisons where they do older white collar criminals that can go to. It really ranges. They're not just one prison that's not bad and one that's good. But they say the worst is county jail. Seems like the worst to me too. Smells like formaldehyde in there. The best feeling when you're walking in to meet with a client in jail is you get to leave whenever you want. Yeah, Vonnie Janae, 100 devices confiscated will be used in the Illinois trial. I've heard that as well. Thank you, Joshua. Glad you're here. None unlikely federal trials, not usually televised. They usually don't let any cameras or anything in there. So Eduardo Duran, what kind of proof is your word against the other person's word? Right. That he said, she said is a very hard thing to prove beyond reasonable doubt, but it becomes a lot easier when it's he said versus they said, which I think is why they charge it this way as opposed to one individual act. It wasn't just 1 versus 1. It was 1 versus 40. All the witnesses, not the victims, but the state put, or the prosecutors put on 40 something witnesses. Lawyer, from Winter Walker, and he stays locked up while awaiting sentencing, ? Is that standard procedure? Please ignore if you answer already. I didn't answer a specific question, but I did mention this. Yes, because he's already in prison. Now he's convicted. He has no more presumption of innocence. He's locked up. All right. Any other questions here? I'm going to scroll down. I'm getting close to the bottom of the chat. We're getting close to the 1 hour mark. Winter Walker, happy to cover it. You guys let me know what you want to hear and talk about, and we'll do it. The more people that want to hear a specific subject, specific case, we'll hit it. So Sadiq Akayami, please, could the fact that the accusers chose to accuse him on a show that earned them some pay rather than reporting the alleged act to authorities have changed the way the case went if argued? It was argued. It was one of the main arguments, main themes of the defense, that these women were just there for money, just there for fame. They did these documentaries. It was argued. And again, this comes back to the jury. What does the jury think? What did they decide? And in this case, they did not think that it made them not credible, at least for the most part. Maliana, yes, he will get to appeal the conviction. So a lot of these questions I have answered, so I'm not going to answer them again. Okay, let's see here. So LP, would he have made a sympathetic witness? I don't think he would have made a sympathetic witness, but people seem to like him. He's got charisma, that's for sure. So maybe the jury would have liked him. Problem is, there was a lot of tapes I think we didn't see that he could have been impeached with over and over again. They could have played every single tape and asked him what was happening in those tapes. Think about it, right? When there's this long of a trial of evidence against you, they can have you up on the stand for 5 days as a criminal defendant, impeaching you, making you explain stuff you don't want to explain or don't know how to explain. And then all of that testimony can be used against you in future criminal trials that he knows he has hanging over his head, which is probably why the feds in other states and other jurisdictions, I should say, have already charged him criminally. So he knows anything you say at any of these trials is going to be used at all the other ones. So Cloutageous, do you think he'll take a plea deal on his other cases? I don't think there's any benefit to doing that at this point. You might as well try them all. I think potentially if he gets life and he exhausts all of his appeals and just gets old in prison and doesn't want to fight it anymore, then maybe, if the cases are still going on. But at this point, I wouldn't expect him to admit that he did it, because that's the other thing you got to realize. He's got a lot of fans supporting him, a lot of people supporting him. He is going to hold to the fact that he's innocent, he didn't do any of this, he didn't commit any crimes, and if he takes plea deals, he's going to have to stand up in court and swear under oath that he did it and he's accepting responsibility. All right, let's see what else we got here. Yeah, Enroth, this is really hard. I mean, research doesn't really say one way or the other if a defendant testifying works in their favor or against them. Cookie Bako Bala, I would say next to zero for the judge trying to do anything to overturn it. There'd have to be some huge misconduct or jury misconduct or something crazy to happen for the judge to overturn it. So Leslie, it's a good question. Where's he going to be held during the next cases? If he's sentenced in New York and there right now, likely he will stay there until the trial starts happening, and he'll just be transported over to the other prison. I don't know if they're going to try him while he's sitting in New York federal prison. They might wait until all of his appeals go through before they go forward with the other charges and actually try him on those. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. No, he won't be able to get out on bond. Yeah, Kathy, I did think this was interesting as well. Did R. Kelly's two live-in girlfriends, Jocelyn and I think Azriel, I think was the other one. All these names are running together now. Testify against him. I know Azriel did. And yeah, I mean, they testified against him, which I think was pretty damning. All right. Any other questions here before we sign off? We're getting close to the end. Yeah, a lot of people asking questions about the members of his organization. We kind of talked through that. Dom K, one more. Does he have to physically be in Illinois for the trial? Will you continue to step in the name of love and you still listen to his music? I don't know. That's tough. The second part of the question is tough. I'll put it up so everybody can see it here. Yes, he will have to be in person in court in Illinois. The judge might even make him show up in person for hearings. They'll transport him, in custody from one place to the other. You have the confrontation clause. You have the right to confront people testifying against you, be there in person, help your lawyers. So yes, he'll be there in person for the trial. COVID and all the other things can affect whether he has to come for anything else. Also, the federal judge probably doesn't going to care if he shows up in person for the hearings if they know exactly where he is, sitting in federal prison in another state. So, but for the trial, yes. I don't know. I think I'll say yes to the music, but I'm not positive. I haven't decided yet, and I haven't heard one of his songs since the trial started. I don't know if that's just fate or if Pandora's not playing it or what. So Joe Higashi, you keep asking the same question. We've been over it a million times about the whole Aaliyah story and this entire trial. The stuff with Aaliyah did not show that he went, asked her parents gave consent, and they went and had a normal wedding. The evidence showed in this case, and the jury convicted him of bribing an official, getting a fake ID, marrying somebody underage without parental consent. That's what the jury decided. So you're throwing out facts that I don't think were put out in trial. That's all I'm saying. I was ignoring it because I think it's kind of convoluted and not necessarily what happened in the trial. And I'm trying to stick to the unbiased stuff that came out in the trial. All right. Any other questions? All right. Educated black man can only appeal errors made by the judge that manifestly change the verdict. 99% of appeals fail. So you can appeal other things, right? You can appeal jury misconduct. You can appeal if you find new evidence or witness intimidation, or if a witness comes out and recants. There are other things that you can do besides just errors made by the judge. But yeah, they can't just be errors that were not a big deal. They've got to be reversible error by the judge. It's very hard to win an appeal, and a very, very small percentage of appeals are successful. Thank you, Kirsten. Yeah, give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and if you want more R. Kelly content. If you like the interaction and like our channel, what we do, please subscribe. We're trying to get to 15K. We're almost there. Yeah, a lot of questions about the Mann Act as well. Do I think it's racist? Do I know the origin of it? I don't. I have never had a Mann Act case. I know it's unusual. I am not necessarily a big fan of it. I think that kind of showed the government's hand more than the racketeering charge, but they picked it. They convicted him of it. Yep. Please hit the thumbs up. Yes, I'm elect. Thank you, guys. Thank you all so much for coming. This was fun. It was last minute. I squeezed it in as soon as I found the verdict. When my last appointment ended, I set up the live. We were able to get a bunch of people on here. It was fun. I'm sure not everybody was able to get here. So if you have more questions and you're watching the video later, leave a question in the comment. And I usually get to most of the questions there reasonably quickly. We have a lot of fun. And again, let me know what cases are next in the pipe that you all want to hear about, and I'll make sure to get as many of them as I can. I don't know. Some people are saying they have a question, but I don't see the question. Appreciate it, Brandon. I appreciate all you guys that enjoy it and tell me you like it. Tell me that I did a good job. There's plenty of the haters seem loud in the comments and in the chat, so I do my best. I do my best to say, as just stick to the facts and what happens and explain the legalities of it and the legal angles. But everybody thinks I hate somebody, which I don't. Thank you to the lawyer. We know. Again, thank you for the excellent commentary. You guys are the best. Appreciate it. All right. That's a wrap on this video. More to come. Make sure you follow our page because we've got another Elizabeth Holmes trial update coming out this week from Pete. I'm going to do potentially a Britney Spears update. A lot is happening in that case. If you like just any famous singer and you're interested in that Britney Spears case, let me know, and I'll do that update. And then we've got some other just random videos coming through. We're trying to keep the content coming, content that you guys enjoy. So always let us know what it is that you enjoy. Thank you, as always, for being here. You guys are too kind, for the most part, in the comments, and I appreciate it. And we'll be back with you guys next time.